Hey, dear community. So today, a little bit more philosophical, meaning debatable, and thoughtful video. So the last past videos were just about clarifying things. It's always a little bit difficult if you manage your future endeavors of what you want to put out into the world. So you need to think clearly, in my mind, of what you publish at which moment, and therefore you have to consider all the implications that your actions might bring about. But for that, I already did the parts I have best knowledge and belief about to be holding a certain degree of freedom for people who watch it in the search of truth, as well as a certain amount of possibility that it might reach people, and most importantly, the percentage of power latent to the videos is divided in such a way that at these moments in time where they are published, no matter how many future videos I intend to produce, this will always be in discussion as long as someone watches my channel. So, without further ado, now to the monsters of truth, which this will be all about, which is also connected to everything I did on the other channels I try to manage into something that brings about change in the world, and most importantly about the values that we assign to truth by the regards of our own conscience and the best knowledge we have about a certain situation, a certain construct or concept that we consider to be evident. So what I call it is knowledge value edges. These are the metric values. I just saw that in a video from Alex O'Connor. Metric values, really nice wording. Knowledge value edges is basically, in essence, the same as truth values or metric values for truth, but means also something else. You have the value on an edge put there to be borderlined by the ideas that it produces. So it's a little bit like dancing on a knife, and that's the same with knowledge, because knowledge is something that only works in one aspect, in one moral idea, right? If you say I'm correct about this color of the sky, you can't be incorrect in how colors are perceived. It's impossible. It's one aspect, one makes, what's the English word? Stimmt's. The English word is knowledge, value edges. I don't care at the moment. It must be something like, if you perceive knowledge as a value edge, you might see that knowledge has only one degree of answers in it, in its essence. So what is knowledge values in the blind of light? What do I mean with blind of light? The blinding light, blind of light, what matter? Doesn't matter. It's the same. So I wrote a little called poem, or better order of rhymes. So once my ghost sparked a current in which I dwell, following the course of winds above the stirred cyclone of my soul's abyss, I thought to nothing, but yet not finding a place amongst the heavens, misunderstanding its so pure clouds, for that then I was in a state of bliss, not missing my future, but lost in the past, choice left to and on the undone. So what I mean with this is in the echoes of conscious, meaning our mind, everything we perceive, everything we regard as active processes or subconscious processes which are under our control and therefore manifest in active, that we can actually perceive and then make a choice on. So, for example, if I consider the subconscious to be true, the implications of that are that the choices I make are just guided by the unconscious, so the subconscious. Because otherwise, everything I would do would be determined, and for that, I would become more of a singularity. For that, I would become characterless, and for that, determinism wouldn't work anymore, which could be well explained away by the fact that you could just perceive conscious and the ways of conscious as a degrading process, as well as such a concept that strengthens the character in a way where you lose some parts but therefore become more of something that you have been before. Not meaning a Nietzschean idea, but rather an idea that it's your core character that comes to the surface while you go through life, which would be then a process by life, not by conscious. What I mean is, in the echoes of conscious, even if you would assume such a subconscious, unconscious layer in your own mind, your own psychology, the processes behind it, the subconscious processes and so forth, they would not spark something in your ghost from which you would assign any value to truth. So if you have a subconscious that is determining everything you do, at a certain point you wouldn't have enough differences in your own mind to consider something to be true or false at all. You couldn't even make that distinction determined anymore. The reason for this being is that once you lose character traits but gain a stronger character in a singularity, a singular manner, that becomes the guiding aspect. And if that is the case, your spirit just, or brain, or whatever you are, or perceive as your being, would in fact just always choose that. And for that, your spirit would always consider that as the correct idea. It wouldn't matter much if it's for survival, if it's for benefit, if it's for pleasure. As soon as your character becomes unbalanced in the sense that you have different ideas that collide and intersect with each other in such a way that you have to make a choice from different ways of living your life and living you through your existence, then your character becomes exactly that, a person that considers everything to be correct, what he or she does, despite assigning any value of truth to it. So never re-questioning again if it is true or not what I believe. But what I mean is, in these echoes of consciousness that are not the subconscious and not guided by it, so that are your free feel thoughts, and that don't necessarily hold any value of truth yet, meaning you have to make choices about how you think, but not yet how you enact your ideas, concepts, wishes into the world, or into your existence rather. You consider some kind of epiphany. It's the slide inside moments where you realize, oh, I have been wrong there, or could have been wrong there, or this is better, or this is a good idea. I didn't come up with that before. How is this possible? These moments, they don't just spark a moment of baffledness, whatever, of other emotions, and mainly also the emotions of astonishing, astonishingness. Well, when you are astonished, and there lies a kind of epiphany next to it. So it's not just these emotions; they rather are sparked and ignited by the fact that you realize that something new is entering your experience. So, in the sense, when you consider Adam and Eve, I tend to recall the story so often. It's actually a good Bible story, even though it's a horrible Bible story. Anyway, this Adam and Eve story, where they take the apple and they don't feel yet the emotions of shame and so forth. They just feel a sense of time frame in which they have an epiphany of something, and then all the rest follows, like God's coming into the garden, throwing them out, their journey, their odyssey begins, they become heroes or villains. It's right, all then in the open, the choice. But in the moment that is before these emotional reactions or conscious reactions, if you would want to call it that, because that's a big problem, I think, that is connected to this whole idea, is that there is this kind of blinding light, this epiphany. You realize your conscious is figuring something out that could be of value, and it's just blinding everything you think of. Like, I'm watching right now the house on the opposite side of the street, and I realized that the architecture as well as the stones are really interesting and hint to some other form of architecture that is implied by the structures that have brought this forth. This is like an epiphany I have on a daily, where I realize different forms of architecture that implement into each other. I tend to view that sometimes. But what's more important is, what I just realized in this moment, is that the architecture, while the roof is I'm missing words here, is partly underlined with stones that lose their size downwards, so like a reverse triangle. The more interesting thing is that the middle stones, so there are three piles of stones. The one has three, then two piles with just one stone each on each layer. And the interesting thing is that the last stone looks like a smaller stone, when in fact it has the same size as the other stones. And it's the interesting thing, that the shadows lay different on it. Yet the house is made in a real nice yellowish color. So the stones are yellowish. And these sacral cathedral ideas that are webbed into the roof of the house, which do come from a Gothic idea, it's undeniable, into a total different case. So it's actually really a nice metaphor for this video. Such a coincidence. So these ideas that are embedded into the architecture that I see on the opposite side of the street, they collide with the idea that the house portrays. It's a yellowish color, but yet we have the central aspect on the shadows that make it appear or like it could have a stone underneath in the last layer that is actually smaller and not just reduced in size, which I mean smaller in proportions. That is really interesting. This is really good metaphor for this video, because from this comes an emotion, from this epiphany. When you realize what I have just realized, you have a coincidence in the world where two archetypes collide. This can be in your mind, this can be in something that you abstracted, it can be in the world that you observe, and so forth. When you have an epiphany as such as this, and in the same sort, the emotion that comes from is something I call Hyanesyengyusina. Oder, wie man es richtig aussprechen würde, ist ein bisschen schwierig auszusprechen. Ja. Oder auf Englisch honesting oder honesting. Und das meint meaning honest and pleasure. Und pleasure hier, pleasures of spirit, weil körperliche Freuden sind dann nochmal anders, wenn es um bestimmte Freuden geht. Und es kann aber natürlich auch auf Essen bezogen sein. Du kannst das Gleiche beim Essen haben, aber nicht zwangsläufig, wenn du jetzt rausgehst und im nächsten Blumenladen was kaufst. Dann, dann kaufst du eine Blume für deinen Garten und du wusstest vorher, welche Blume du haben willst und du kannst nur interne Epiphanies haben, aber nicht etwas, was hervorgerufen ist durch die Art der Erfahrung, die du gerade machst. Ich würde das als erfahrungsseparat bezeichnen und vor allen Dingen halt nicht mal in die dieser deutsche Begriff. Sorry, I switched to German. So this motion, this honest thing, meaning honest and pleasure, meaning you can't just go to the next store and buy flowers and think now that you have the same epiphany for the pleasures of the mind than the pleasures of the flesh. The epiphanies are different in my mind. I firmly believe that. And these epiphanies you get from a certain amount of intrinsic force to an idea, as well as the consequences that follow from your actions. When they collide in such a way that you have an epiphany, you have this sense of blinding light in your soul. It's at least how I feel. I think it's the same with every conscious. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's for me that way. And this emotion then is for me almost at the same time, but it's weird, it's flipping around in that sense. And when you have this with pleasure of the flesh, you tend to not have it in such a way that it is regarded, at least me not, to the outside, inside, the extrinsic forces that are of the consequences from your actions that you guide the pathway to the apex star with. So the idea which I want to portray is the meaning when you have these epiphanies, they're not the same as emotional ones. You have to make a difference there in knowledge. And that's why I would call this something like haunted and howling knowledge. So haunted knowledge is the knowledge that you just perceive by emotion, by yourself, by your ideas that you conceptualize. And the howled knowledge, like the wolf to the moon, is when you realize that your actions cause a reaction of chains of possibilities of ideas and epiphanies, as well as shadows and so forth. The night is dark, and I won't cite Game of Thrones here, but when morning comes, it is almost as an instant when you don't realize how the moon has vanished from the sky. So, meaning this moment of epiphany is in the idea where you gain knowledge about extrinsic forces, very difficult to perceive. It's a very subtle moment, while you are fully conscious about the moment, though. It's a weird thing in my mind. You experience it, and it's like a flip in time, as I said before, and you perceive everything and all your emotions in one breath. But even if you would take that breath in that moment, continue the thought of taking the breath, you would be just thrown back into the same situation where your mind, your ghost, your spirit tries to get this epiphany. And that is like really bad, because if you can't then make something from the moment of which you have to consider to be for something to be true, you're literally left with skepticism at all points. You can never be sure of something. And that's why it's so crucial to understand the point of epiphany and make use of it in such a way that you can further recall on this moment in the pursuit of knowledge, and therefore wisdom and pleasure and power. Meaning, the blinding light is a moment in your conscious that is perceivable in its beginnings, can take hours, ages for something to emerge in a deer that everyone that perceives truth might consider valuable. But yet, when you have such a moment of clear mindedness, then it's very important to get that moment in your conscious and fully perceive it. Otherwise, you are always left with skepticism about if your values and metrics of truth regarding these truth-edged values and knowledge value edges, which I would call it, to be wrong or right. So this is the light, and it's the way towards it. You need to have security, no, not security. You need to have certain, sure amount of truth to even understand the value of knowledge in the moment of epiphany for a potential degree of new concepts, ideas, and wisdom. So what are the monsters of truth? Well, faced with one's own flaws, the conscious experiencing this must consider the possibility of having been a slave of a fundamental moral misconception. Meaning, if I realize that I should not eat meat because it is in fact a wrong moral idea, I am faced in an instant, not even, with all the ideas that I might have been wrong about. So all the flaws I have in my character, all of it, I'm suddenly faced with the opposite conclusion that what I have thought to be me is wrong. So when I thought I was righteous in not slaughtering an animal because it is a friend of mine, but was justified in doing so with some being that just exists, and I realize, oh, this is wrong, like there's no moral equality in that. Like, even if I don't put humans and animals on the same scale, that still doesn't make sense. And if I have to admit that, I do have to admit, like, this is hypothetical, not meaning I'm right. I do have to admit that I might have been not on the good path, meaning I have a flaw. And for that, my conscious experience and my conscious experiencing this must consider the possibility that there could be the almighty judgment of my own spirit and more than that, of my own consequences of actions, that I have made a mistake. This is, of course, not a problem. Mistakes are usual, flaws are a consequence of being a being to live. But what is the implication and the the reasoning from this is, in fact, and you have to consider that as well, that you are a slave of something that you have fundamentally believed to be true, but that is a moral misconception. Like, this is with all epiphanies, with all of these moments, it's true in my mind. You can't have a new knowledge without raising questions about the fundamental laws on how you got this knowledge and what this knowledge means for the things that were before in the known but are now added to the pool of known knowledge, meaning not have been blinded by the light but rather seeing in it. So you see the light, you have the epiphany, and you suddenly have vision on the things that it sheds its light on. You have to consider that everything that is fundamental for your whole idea on how you got there could be added something to that, even if it's not the core ideas that are misconceptualized. It is well possible that the ideas for how you manage ideas could now be wrong. For example, you are in essence, not just in essence, but rather in everything you come to do, come to be, convinced of the idea and the fact that knowledge and going to school is a good thing. Now you realize there are bad teachers, like not even aggressive teachers, they're just bad teachers. So when I sent my kids to school, not to YouTube school, you realize, oh boy, I said it again, I really have to work on my fucking manners. No, I did it again. I'm sorry, YouTube. No, what I mean is, for this, I tend to assume some flaws like this. It's so weird because I sometimes adopt ideas from for reasons that are totally, it doesn't matter, like crazy. Because I adopted this oh boy just for it to be funny sometimes, and now it is funny and I'm not happy with it anymore. Anyway, the idea is for these epiphanies that if you have these dogmas, these ideas, these core beliefs that you hold that guide your way through the darkness of knowledge, and you see there are bad teachers, and you're faced with the idea that you have made the mistake that you sent your kid to a wrong school where there could be bad teachers that teach that evolution is a lie, for example, and so forth, if you are an atheist. And not even that, you can also be a believer and believe in evolution, and you have so many varieties why it could be true, which I believe to be true, by the way. I honestly believe evolution to be true in a weird way, and it's weird how it came all to being, what we are calling the conscious experience of life by living beings. I nonetheless believe, though, that there are evolutionary lines and different steps in evolution and so forth that make a being survive better, and all these ideas. Like, I think they're damn true, but they just are more complex than what we are told. It's what I think. I think the common theory to explain evolution away with simple rationalizations on ideas that are forced by Occam's razor don't fit the gratitude of evolution. 9. The weight of evolution. I wanted to say a different word, but it's the weight of evolution, not the gratitude. Don't fit the weight of the implication, meaning the implications are that our conscious evolves without our knowledge, that we are formed without knowing what we will be. And the explanation is chosen by Occam's razor, which must be the simplest explanation. When in fact, that can never be true with such a heavy argument. Weight, because it would not fit at all into human psychology to break it down, or animal psychology to break it down into a simple I will survive and I will not survive, or I'm from that part of animal and that part of animal can't have influenced my evolution, and the way that predators formed, that prey formed, didn't evolve my evolutionary ideas and so forth. As said, it's way more complex than saying I'm the best one who adapted. It's also way more complex than saying this is about God. It could be, I'm not denying that this is always the wild card, but fundamentally true, I think, here is that the idea that evolution, for example, as a complex construct, cannot be explained away by simple reasoning. It's impossible. Anyway, back to topic. If we have these monsters of truth, which, for example, are also this kind of thing that simple explanations and also best explanations, then I can well, in good silence, meaning in good conscience, meaning in something that I consider to be righteous, cause a light bulb to illuminate my room, yet not feather the time I lose at the moment of fear. And the moment of fear, I mean, does the light go on? Will the light blind me? Will I look into the light? Will I not be able to sleep? Or worse, did I forget to tidy up my room in a certain manner so that oh no, the light will make me see my unclean room even if it's just in the corner. Shit. You know, like this thing where you realize something in your room is not exactly how you wanted it to be, then you are forced with the ideas. For example, if you lay your clothes on the ground, you're forced with the implication that it might lay different than when you saw it in the darkness, because the shadows are not clear as light. And that goes with all the things that could happen. There could be more fear, like you could have the fear of, okay, if I turn on the light now, will I be able to turn it off then to save energy? Like, this is also well possible. You can have an immense amount of fear for everything. Meaning, in this moment of complete bliss and complete clear-mindedness, for an epiphany, for an illumination, for something that causes wisdom, you're forced and faced with the fear of flaws, even if they didn't happen yet, because you have to consider it to assign values of truth to the knowledge. You can't do it otherwise. As long as you don't know your subjective experience of a certain situation, you cannot mathematically disprove that it is not your subjective experience. And for this, you cannot look at a certain idea without knowing if it is caused by fear, wisdom, arrogance, or anything, because you don't know your subjective emotions and values to it anymore. Even if you would now know the values you hold in a subjective experience while you experience it, you don't know the values anymore of how you made these character traits to be of truth. Because at that moment, you are ruled by fear. And that is all because the moment of epiphany is such blinding in its nature. You're, in my situation, always when I have a realization, I'm faced with the ideas that I have to incorporate into my life and how I can make this valuable in the future. Like, if I see a nice architecture, how can I not copy this and still make the ideas that I have from the experience bring value into my life? This is a very important thing for me to even know if my values of truth are correct. The knowledge value edges, if even they are correct. And if then this both comes to be true, do they are in line with each other, right? Is the knowledge value edges not making it obsolete, or rather making it partially impossible for the value of truth of these to be enforced on my actions? And if that is in line, a really weird thing happens. You realize the epiphany must be true. You can work with the knowledge. You have the light shining into your room. You know where you have put your clothes. You know where they lay right now. You know why the clothes might lay different because you did that and that before, and you remember ideas that you had before and can construct them into the whole scenario. Meaning, if I turn on the light bulb in my room and I realize it's day outside, I might have just been still lost in sleep. Right? So, the way out of this, for the idea that I just presented in my mind, is that shadows guided the spirit I thought to be my lost cause. In spite the flaming whisper that ignited the ghosts that lie awake, the ghosts that lie awake in the breath of my haunted voices vows in excellent. The guide to the light meaning is understanding the darkness. Not because it's the opposite of light. It's a weird misconception, I think. It's more about its calm and steady flaws. So if you look at the darkness, it has nothing in it. It's just it. And if you have total darkness, you have no room for observing matter anymore. Or observing anything, actually. It's a big flaw. Yet, it's such a steady focus. And to do this is to not be bound by the rays of shimmering angels. When the knowledge is explaining itself like a prophet from heaven sent. You cannot do mistakes by writing a wrong word. He cannot be blinded by the light of angels, the knowledge that he or she is given, and put misconceptions into the ideas that he or she receives. So, Islam is a nice metaphor here. When you view the story of Prophet Muhammad, he doesn't know language, yet he can portray the ideas formulated for him by the angels he spoke to. So I don't know if it's real or not. I don't know. I don't believe in Islam. I'm not a believer. I do believe that there's a God. Which doesn't mean I believe in God. It's a huge difference. I do believe in gods, but not. It's really difficult. Anyway, when you have the knowledge transferred from its source of the engulfing energy that takes your vision, you cannot depurify the light. It's impossible. So knowledge is true or not. If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true. And that's where the angels come into play. They present themselves different in different forms and different aspects. They're always looking somehow like themselves, but never yet the same. And at that point, the ideas that are formulated cannot be known before. So important here is, if I know language, like Prophet Muhammad didn't. Apparently, it's like there are actually evidences for that. I think it's true. It doesn't mean any of it is true, but it does mean that the premise holds true that he didn't know language. The race of these angels, if you would know words, you would always have your subjective experience put into the order of words you give while formulating the arguments and conceptualizations of the ideas you perceive. Meaning, if you know the light and bathe in it, while you want to see the light, you will not see much. But if you are in fact surrounded by darkness, and your shadow doesn't even exist because your mind doesn't have a way to look back, the light becomes quite obvious.